Welcome to IT Emotion, where we make autonomous IT entertaining and informative. My name is Sanjog.
And I'm Josh. We are your hosts. Today, we're going to be talking about automation and IT operations with Hans from Norlys. And we're going to kick things off with an icebreaker. It's a game based around this candy called conversation hearts. In the United States, these are things that kids give each other on Valentine's Day in like their classrooms. They go back to about 1950. They're created by a company called Necco that makes these Necco wafer candies. When you hear that, if you've tried both candies, you realize they both taste like chalk, so it makes sense that they're sort of the same thing.
It's gross.
They're not that bad. I like them. And we're going to, maybe we'll open some up and we'll taste them here while we go through the game. So the game is, Hans, you are from Denmark, correct?
Yeah.
And you were telling me that Valentine's Day really isn't a big deal there, right?
No, until now it hasn't been. So, but things have the tendency to get from your side of the world to our side of the world. So
Sure.
Eventually it will probably be something.
well, that's great. So the game we're going to play is the way conversation hearts work. They're these little candies, and
Definitely tastes like chalk.
And they have things printed on them. I don't know if you can see that from there. And so I'll read you a pair of things that could be printed on it, and you're going to try to guess which one is real. So for the first one, is the real thing be mine or be great?
I'll probably be mine.
Ooh,
that's right.
No, you were correct. You were correct. All right, and the next one is hit me up or text me.
Could be text me.
That's right.
That's right. And you know, of course, text me is kind of a modern edition, right? When I was in school, it was call me. They still have call me. All right, the next one, is it goat or is it sheep?
Sheep.
All right.
Is it? Oh man. Come on.
All right, so I know that's a hard one. I knew that would be a hard one. What made you want to go with sheep?
I thought it would be goat, but let me just say I said sheep.
Well, I think you're the goat. Greatest
so,
of all time.
So goat, greatest of all time. That's what it stands for. Of course, you know, sheep are a much cuddlier animal, so they're probably more appropriate for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, it's true.
All right, next question. Hold hands or hug me?
Valentine's Day would probably be hug me.
Yep, that is correct.
All right. Now, is it Rockstar or is it Lego Lover?
Lego lover, definitely.
That's right.
All right, I actually miscircled that. It's the actual heart says Rockstar, but Hans, you are a Lego lover, so I thought we'd throw that in there and make it the right answer.
Of course.
It is the right answer for you.
Coming from Denmark, you always love Lego. So, and being an adult, I know it's a bit childish to play with Lego, but I still love it, and I think it's one of the best toys to work with. So currently, I'm working on a project with building a Titanic. It's a 9,000 brick build, so it's not something you just do over the weekend. So for me, it is something that you will sit with and relax in the evening, and brings you back to your childhood, and that relaxes you very much. So I love it.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of fun. I mean, I kind of rediscovered Legos when my son got to be about 3 years old. And I absolutely, I agree with you. It's a lot of fun to kind of build things, be creative, or just kind of create a cool replica like you're doing. And yeah, and of course, you don't live that far from Legoland. Isn't that right?
It's a 1 hour drive, so to the original Legoland. I know they have expanded all over the world, so
that's right.
But
we
have it right in the backyard.
Actually, we have a little message for you. Chewy wants to deliver it to you. Can you read that?
Nope. Even though I have glasses.
He has a little letter. It says, from Chewy to Hans.
Oh, thank you.
That's right.
So happy Valentine's Day, Hans.
Thank you.
All right. So Hans, you seem like a citizen of the world. Where else aside from Denmark, or what areas of Denmark have you lived, and maybe other parts of the world have you visited?
I have only lived in Denmark, but I've lived different places in Denmark, but never in Copenhagen. That's a place I don't go. I wouldn't live there.
Is it too dense of a city, or what is it?
In Denmark, it is more or less divided into the people that are on the island of Sjælland, is it called, where you have Copenhagen, and then
Mhm.
you have the rest of Denmark.
Well, it's kind of like a small community, though. I'm sure that you know many people that live in Copenhagen that are in the same field as you, and everybody knows everybody in Denmark, right? Is that in tech
Yeah,
or in IT operations specifically?
especially in network, I know a lot of people.
Sure.
And to
Where
be
else?
fair, sorry,
I said, where else have you traveled to around the world?
US a lot of times, Europe mainly, and one trip to Africa in Kenya.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Not to
Nairobi?
forget our honeymoon.
Where
Yeah,
in Kenya? Nairobi?
Nairobi, yeah, and on a safari.
Oh, very cool. I've always wanted to do the safaris. I heard you're quite the host when you have folks actually visiting you in Denmark. Josh actually had mentioned that you'd come and pick him up every morning before you'd head to the office and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is that a part of the culture in Denmark? Is it super hospitable and
Uh, yeah, I think that we're kind of that like that. So I think when you invite people over, you need to take care of them. So that's at least that is in my DNA, is to take care of people.
Here's a common misconception you can debunk. What we call Danishes, you can explain how that name came to be, I think, and what they're called in Denmark.
What you call Danish, we actually call Vienna bread. So we have it from Vienna in Austria. So I don't know why you call it Danish, but I guess there is a baker from Denmark that went to the US at some point and called it Danish.
Yeah. So
So it's not even a Danish invention.
yeah. So we get to misappropriate the credit, right?
Yeah.
that's amazing.
So Hans, can you tell us a little bit about your career journey? I know you started in networking and you made your way into monitoring. Tell us a little bit about how that came about.
My IT career started in '95 when I was hired as an internal IT staff member. And I got into networking because I find this very interesting. And from that point on, I moved more into networking and got hired by a consulting company doing Cisco networking primarily. And from that point, I thought, it could be interesting to work at Cisco. And I got a job there as a system engineer. From there on, I were hired by IBM.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it was an acquisition in the company that I was in. But nevertheless, I ended up in a smaller consultant company. And at that place, we wanted to have monitoring as a service. And that is where I really started doing monitoring. So we started out with the standard packs from SolarWinds, I guess, and moved on to other tools. And those tools have its limitations. So at one point, I think we had 20 or 30 servers doing the monitoring at different customers. And doing that was kind of a hassle because doing reporting on a lot of different servers, some of the customers were spread over several servers. And we had to take all the KPI data and move it into another tool. And that at that point we were using Splunk as the data crunching tool. So we use that to add to give us the reports. So it was a system that we have built with a lot of duct tape. So,
A lot of
and
different
that did not scale at
technologies.
all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of different
Yeah.
technologies for a lot of different purposes, but for one common cause, one common thing that you're trying to accomplish, right? Tell us over the course of your career, what are the most fun technologies that you've used and kind of learned about?
I think fun is also challenging. Challenging things I love to work with. So
Natural problem solver,
if
huh?
yeah, if there's something that I really don't understand, I want to dig into it and figure out why it is as it is. And currently, I'm doing a lot of Python programming to solve the issues that we are trying to solve today. And I find that very interesting to do because it is something that I haven't done a lot in the past.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Your career kind of took this progression, the way you described it, from very like, layer one physical infrastructure to configuration to, more in-depth configuration and monitoring. And now you're kind of at the sort of creation phase as you've kind of progressed, you're taking a greater and greater role in the overall functionality of things.
Yeah.
It's an evolution, definitely. Careers tend
Yeah.
to be that way in
Yeah.
general, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you're part of a fairly small group of people in the Danish telecom industry who've really kind of transformed things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I guess we are a handful of people doing some serious monitoring, and we have been in this game for some years, and some of my colleagues in the business, they are mainly focused on managing the systems, other are more focused on programming the different integrations, and I'm a bit overall, so, but it's a fairly small group because Denmark is not that big, and the target audience that we have with the ScienceLogic is companies of a certain size.
Yeah. Well, I remember you joking with me when you were in the United States recently about how, the plane contained almost all the knowledge of this monitoring stuff of the entire country of Denmark. So,
Yeah,
is a very high value flight.
we took the same flight. All yeah.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned before the importance of the tool consolidation. What are the benefits and how do you go about doing it?
I think the old term "one pane of glass" is something that is still true. It's still something that you need to take into consideration when you want to monitor a network or systems. So that is something that is great, and not having to look into different systems. And what we're doing here at Norlys is transforming the monitoring from, I guess, 6, 7, 8 systems into one. And it's quite a journey to do that because there's a lot of legacy involved in that.
Yeah, that's sort of the holy grail, right? Of getting all your systems integrated into one. And so when you're planning out your automations and your integrations, you're really thinking about that end goal, it sounds like, of we want everything in one place so that, the end user of this information gets everything they need easily.
So tell us a little bit more about how you plan out your automations before you
I think,
implement.
yeah, I think that the way that we are approaching this is that we are talking to the NOC staff. What kind of issues do you see? What are actions do you do on a different on these incidents? And let's just do that for you. So that's the first thing that we will work on is getting to know the issues that we can solve easily and take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So you really have to start with that sort of stakeholder input, right? What problems
Yeah.
is the organization trying to solve? What problems do different people have? In your experience, how in depth do your automations need to be before they start to become useful?
Not that much. It's we will start simple and I'm pretty sure we can save minutes per incident every time if we can add just a few show commands to an incident.
Sure.
That will help a lot.
So,
And from there we can start to fix the issues by other commands more than just show. So that's further down the road.
right. So for those who don't know, the show command is kind of in Cisco systems how you get details on configuration. So what kind of what you're saying, Hans, is the show command is kind of a starting point, but there's other commands people could run they don't think to run, so you're able to sort of automate that, and it just takes a little bit, right? A minute here and a minute there, and that time really starts to add up. Where do you have some examples of where you've seen some success with those sort of little automations, just small changes?
If you have something like high CPU, the first thing that a technician would do is log into the equipment and see, is it still present? Is it still something that is issue? Where is the issue? What kind of load is it? And that is something you can just run and add into the ticket right away, for instance.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
You've worked a lot with Cisco stuff. Have you done other vendors like networking gear? Have you worked on that stuff?
Did a lot of security devices and checkpoints and what have you, and also different network vendors. Bay Network, I guess they were called, and we have here at Norlys we have a lot of Juniper and Nokia.
Yeah,
and I think we have everything that is valid to move data. So.
Well, I personally am a pretty big fan of the Juniper architecture. I think it's a really interesting design. How do you go about learning all the kind of new stuff you need to learn to stay proficient with all these different technologies?
I just dig into it. I think if you have an area yet you think you know something about it, the more you dig into it, the more you know you don't know anything about it.
Right.
And that is something that I like to dig into different areas and get more knowledge about it. I'm just hungry for knowledge
Sure.
for that sake. So I try to not assume anything. I need to know for sure that this is the way things work. It's also for the SL1 platform. I need to know exactly how it works. So I tend to be on the database level and in the log files, and I tend to have all the answers for the support before they ask them.
Sure.
So
the kind of key to your success in learning all these technical things is, it sounds like, is constant curiosity. Do you find that there's sort of a stacking effect where as you learn one technology, say Cisco devices, then you switch over to Juniper, do you find that like the commonalities help you learn it faster, or do you find that the commonalities sometimes make it harder because they're similar but not the same, and so there's this kind of dissonance there?
you also have you always have a head start on that one because you have the base knowledge. So that would also go for programming languages. And I think at the university we studied Modular 2. It is actually the preprocessor for Python, I guess.
Yeah, the foundation.
But again, it's just a programming language. Yeah.
Learning the foundations, the fundamentals will help you kind of sprout in, and as long as you're curious about it, you can kind of dig in deeper and learn how to really leverage it.
Yeah, you can say that in programming, for example, there's about 8 or 10 fundamental concepts, and everything else beyond that is just combinations of them, applications of them, giving names to patterns of using them. And so if you learn Modula 2, it'll help you learn C, it'll help you learn Python, it'll help you learn Haskell, it'll help you learn Pascal, it'll help you learn Go, right? Like Rust, all these different languages. But each language has its own strengths, its own things that it's optimized for. And so you can kind of pull from the library or pull from the language a little bit easier. And Yeah, I've certainly found learning different languages has kind of opened my eyes to different paradigms, right? I like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, in this language they sort of do it that way, and then you can kind of take that knowledge and use it in a different programming language, or use it as part of your like way to solve problems.
And solving problems is something that you need to take from the. You have different levels when you're problem solving, and
Hmm.
you need to have the base level fixed before you can go on to the next. So
Hmm.
Yeah,
that's also a way to work in layers.
yes, that's a good point. As you go to run an issue to ground, right? When you're trying to solve a problem, whether it's a technical problem or not, it's that like, all right, what is the most fundamental thing that's broken, and then how do I move up from it?
The layers,
Yeah,
the OSI layers.
The OSI
yeah,
layers, yeah. If you're in the
exactly.
networking world,
Yeah.
Speaking of networking in general, you know, if you were a fresh university grad, what advice would you give yourself now, kind of having years and decades of experience? What advice would you give yourself to expedite your journey in learning IT operations and networking, things of that nature?
It would definitely be start with programming.
Why is that?
It is something that, yeah, because there are so many things you can solve if you can program it, um, and that will save you time um, going forward.
so really, it's kind of back to that automation question we were talking about, right? It's
Yeah,
the more you can program, the better you can automate workflows or automate things that you need to do. That makes a lot of sense. That's why I like computers, because I hate tedium, and I can make the computer do the tedium for me, so I can do something that's more interesting and ultimately more valuable.
Work yourself out
I
of a
know
job
the
eventually.
networking guys here. They don't do a lot of manual configuration of the devices. It is all done through automations.
And that's interesting. Do you for those automations, are you doing like the sort of infrastructure as code concept where a lot of those configurations and things are saved in repositories, and there's
Templates.
automations
Yeah,
to deploy them and that kind of thing?
yeah. They have a deployment system where we need to deploy this service, and they have templates to do that. So they just enter it into the system, and anything is done automatically. So the human factor is out of the equation.
Yeah, so I think that kind of shines a light on sort of the counter to a lot of people's fears about automation, right? People are scared that with enough automation they'll be out of a job, but the reality is there's still a human saying we need to take this action. This thing still needs to happen. The difference is all the tedium is taken out of it, and there's way less room for error, right? And so by having that template, you can be sure that that's set up correctly every time once you set it up correctly once.
I think that it is something that always has been an issue. When the typewriter were introduced, the secretary said, "Oh, we can type faster, so then we will not have a job." Then the computer came, and now we can fill out these letters very fast, so we will be out of the job. So, but in the end,
The work just changes.
everybody still has some. Yeah, your role is just something different.
Hmm. It's not that the job is gone, it's just the role changes, but there is a certain fact that to some degree there are certain types of jobs that will likely become more automated and
Sure.
therefore not requiring a human to drive that value. What are any predictions that you have in the next 5 or 10 years that this might occur? A lot of people fear, quote unquote blue collar jobs are the ones that are at most risk. But I read an article recently that there's actually a lot of professional office setting type of jobs that are actually the most at risk.
Sure, yeah.
Which ones of those two groups would you say are probably most at risk within the next 5-10 years?
Absolutely the latter one, because I think that a lot of the work that is done by lawyers can actually be automated. And that is something that we would think of as being a high paid job. But look at what the Chat GTP can do today and and enhance on that one. So I think that AI will really take off within the next 5 years.
How have you used Chat GPT?
For now, it's been playing around and trying to ask questions that couldn't be Googled. Um, Something like write a story about two cats and a dog,
Right.
and make it a romance story or something like that, and it just piles you out a short story, and you think, where did it get that from?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and but also you can use it for programming. So
Well,
I tested out something.
what do you think are the biggest use cases that's gonna come out of it? I mean, now that it's been acquired by Microsoft and it's gonna be eventually integrated with Bing, that search engine platform, what is there any predictions on the use cases that are going to be the most valuable to organizations, businesses, or even people?
There's been a lot of stories about it here in Denmark, at least, that students were trying to use it for filling out their assignments.
Yeah.
And that is something that is because
Plagiary.
write a thesis about something like this, and the answer is actually pretty okay. So
if you ask the same question, is it going to produce the same answer though, or is it going to be different every single time?
No, there's randomness introduced into the neural network, so it produces different answers.
So then how can people even cross-check if it was plagiarized?
That's difficult.
You can't.
That's one of the
that's the issue.
Wow.
That's one of the challenges that we're gonna have to grapple with technologies like this. Is it is different every time. It's customized every time, so it's not like you're copying someone else's essay. I heard that they gave some like board exams, maybe medical board exams, to Chat GPT, and it was able to select the right answers. Right, so that's kind of scary.
Wow. Well, it's a good time for lazy students to be at a university. I'm assuming it's.
The essays, the text it writes tends to sound like a student essay, like not a good essay, right? It kind of tends to have certain phrases it likes to use, like it is important to remember, and it's important to note, and stuff like that, where it kind of gives you this like, I'm an average 10th grader writing an essay feel, rather than like, I'm an expert. But you can't say like, oh, write in the style of Neil deGrasse Tyson. It'll have a lot of his like, phrases that he tends to use.
Yeah.
That kind of come through as it goes. So you can kind of get a little bit better, but it's not currently at the point where it's writing sounds like, a published author or something like that.
Right. So another question for you is, what are some other emerging technologies that you're starting to see kind of really impact your day-to-day social living? For example, robotics. I know for some countries, they're starting to experiment with using robotics to take away jobs such as a waiter or waitress, right? Serving food. Yep. Are there any things in Denmark that are starting to emerge that you're starting to notice through the leverage of new technologies?
Not a lot. The local sushi restaurant has a robot that serves the food, but that's about it. It's a fun gadget they have bought, but that's about it. Some other things that we are going to see in the environment is smaller robots driving around in the on the sidewalk and picking up cigarette butts, I guess they're called.
Wow.
And scrape off chewing gum. They are developing that at the moment.
Are the
It's
streets
actually one of my old colleagues who invented those robots.
Oh, wow.
Are the streets cleaner than Singapore's?
No, definitely not. I heard that they were spot clean.
That's right. Yeah, I heard you can't even spit on the floor, otherwise you get a fine or something.
They take it pretty seriously in Singapore. There's a major breakfast food type chain, and the local locations all use these little waiter robots, and so they can autonomously get to the table, and they've got 2 levels where they can stack a tray, and so it can deliver the food to you, but they still have the waiter come and take the food from the robot and put it on the table.
Uh-huh.
And so
Yeah.
Not really a major labor savings at this point, but I think in my mind the major driver isn't necessarily going to be cost, right? It's not like it's going to be that much cheaper than an employee. Maybe
Sure.
it will. I think that the big driver is going to be that the upcoming generation is a lot smaller than the millennials or the baby boomers, and so you're going to have this kind of inversion in a lot of countries, especially countries in Europe have this sort of inverted population pyramid. And so there's a lot of jobs that would traditionally be done by, say, younger people when they start their career that there's just not going to be enough people for. So they're going to have
Right.
to be creative and finding ways to replace that work when they can't replace it with people.
Well, that's what's funny is we used to think overpopulation was going to be the big problem, and then now everybody's a little bit scared. They're like, actually, it's probably underpopulation because
It could. I mean, not in the immediate future, but over the next, say, 50 years.
Yeah, because the baby boomer generation is significantly larger than maybe Gen Z is right now on a global perspective, right? I mean, there's countries that have deliberately reduced, enforced laws that said you can't have more than X amount of children, or
Right.
or don't encourage it in general socially, right? Because we're very career driven. At least over the last few generations, it's been like, okay, everybody should have their career and success before they have children, so they can make more responsible decisions when they have children and things of that nature.
People are waiting for the right moment.
Yeah.
Exactly.
May
Exactly.
never come.
Well, Hans, thanks for taking the time to meet with us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys.
Can you share with the audience how people can connect with you or Norlys?
Norlys do have a website, norlys.dk, and you can connect to me with on Teams or on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Everybody, thanks again for joining this session today. Please give a warm goodbye to the man of the hour, Hans. Thanks again, folks. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast app. We're hosted on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and many other podcast platforms. We're regularly adding new podcasts, and our podcast is available at sciencelogic.com/podcast.